There were not recognized religions, but it was freedom of religion, and the state will not interfere in the religious sphere, so the religious organization can be organized as they want. And at the same time, the state in France, and this is very important to know and to understand for the future after 1905, that the state had the obligation to assure the condition of the freedom of religion and worship. It is a constitutional obligation. So you could not have, the separation could not be a kind of complete indifference or hostility or this type of things, because in a democracy as France, the state has the pure and the complete responsibility to create the condition for exercising the freedoms for the citizens. And the freedom of religion or freedom of belief is one of the freedoms of the citizen, so the state has to care about that. So that's the system, the new system of 1905. Of course, you understand it has been a kind of problem for the external policy, because in the world of this time, the religious factor was and is important, and all by tradition the French diplomacy has taken into consideration the religious factors, so it was a true problem of adaptation. I want to say, and I will speak to you a little bit about our instruments, the tools of the French diplomacy to taking into consideration the religious factor, and I will speak to you about the stakes and the issues that we address nowadays. But I want to say, to conclude this introduction, that the challenge was to assume the past of France, our religious past, abroad, and to assume that in the new framework of the separation. And I think it was done. I will give you two examples. The first is that at the moment of the separation, it was the breaking of relationships with the Holy See in Rome, because at this time, the condition, quite rude condition in fact, before the separation, were not accepted by Rome, and it was a breaking off of the diplomatic relationships. But in 1921-24, France reassumed the relationships with Rome, with the negotiation, and it was a kind of normalization of the relationships with the Vatican. And the second issue, which was very important, was that France had a long and traditional role of a kind of protection of the Eastern Christians in the Ottoman Empire by treaties, and a special responsibility linked with that in Jerusalem and the Holy Land. And the Republic, after 1905, for preserving our national and diplomatic interest, assumed this kind, in a new context, this kind of responsibility, and preserving a special link with the Eastern Christians in the region, and having in Jerusalem, you have a set of Catholic communities being protected by France. Till today, it's not a matter of history and the past times, but we assume this type of responsibility today. So I will speak a little bit about our tools for the religious diplomacy, and after I will speak about the stakes. About the tools, my function, Advisor for Religious Affairs, was created in 1920. And it's interesting to see that it was after the separation, and the government of this time, and Aristide Briand, decided to create a new function for having a diplomat negotiating the renewal of the relationships with the Vatican. I spoke before about that, and this posting was created, and after that, after the reassuming of the relationships, it was decided to maintain the post for the relationships with the religions in France about the international issues and with the foreign religious authorities. So there are here two very different functions. The first function is to have relationships with the French religious authorities about their international issues. And each religion in France, of course, has the international contacts and the international stakes, and we try to help them in that. I will give you some example. If you take, for example, the Catholic Church, which is the first religion in France till now, there is for history a special kind of sensitivity about the matter of the Near East, Middle East, and the situation of the Eastern Christians. I spoke before too about that. And we have a dialogue with the church about this matter, what is our policy, what the situation, the problem of the religious minorities, and this type of things. The French Protestant, that the French Federation of the Protestant of France, they have a strong focus on Africa because they have historical links with the churches in the French-speaking Africa. So we have to dialogue with them each 3 months about the situation in Africa, and you saw the crisis of this time, like Mali and the Republic of Central Africa and so on. Islam in France is the second religion of the country, and we have no religious statistic in France. It's not allowed, but if you have a kind of evaluation, you could have the basis for the Muslim faith would be the population interested will be of between 4 and 5 million of persons, perhaps 4.5. which is quite important, and I say second religion of the country. And we talk with the Islamic organization. We have like 5, 6 big Islamic organizations of the country, and it was created in 2003, the French Council of the Muslim Worship, le Conseil français du culte musulman, because it was at this time the strong willingness of the government, I have to say, to have one unique interlocutor in the French Islam to talk about this, the matter of religion, worship, and the halal, the pilgrimage, and formation of imams, and so. And so we have a constant relationships with the French Council. We have one issue which is very important for us, for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, is the pilgrimage, the Hajj, because our Consulate General in Jeddah has to give the consular protection or support for the pilgrims, and there are 30,000 pilgrims from France every year. It's not like in Indonesia, I know, but for us it's quite important in fact. And so we have this consular support and consular protection, and the state, in the French case being a laic state, secular state, could not organize the pilgrimage, in fact, but we have by all the ways to give the support to the pilgrims and going there, which is more the consular support. It's true, we have contacts with the other religions of France. Of course, we have in the case of France, from 2010, the National Conference of the Religious Leaders, which is an initiative of the religions, and the conference gathered the 6 main religions of the country. So you have namely the Catholics, the Muslims, the Protestants, the Jews, the Orthodox, and the Buddhists, which are the six main. So I have contact, we have contact with these main religions, and including, of course, other smaller religions on the international issues. And the role of the advisor for religious affairs is to deal with foreign religious authorities through the ambassadors. Of course, that in each country in the world, the ambassador is in charge of having the relationships with the civil society and the religious leaders, religious organization. That's part of the job. But we could have, with these foreign religious authorities, visits in France, perhaps more stronger relationships. It's true, I will give you two examples. The first is with the patriarchs of the Eastern churches. They make a lot of visits in France about the situation in the Near East and the Middle East. We have too a strong relationship with the Patriarch of Constantinople for the Orthodox churches. And I am in charge too of the relationship with the Organization of Islamic Cooperation in Jeddah, which is not exactly, as you know, a religious organization, but an organization based on the fact that it gathered the Muslim countries in the world. And we have created a political dialogue with the Organization of Islamic Cooperation that we have each year about the matters of common interest between France and the organization. So, my second part will be about the stakes, which are the stakes now for the religious factor in the international relationships. Yes, so I see for us, I see two stakes, two major stakes. First is about the liberty, the freedom of religion and the religious minorities, because it's an issue about human rights in the world. And the second is a little bit about the debate and the explanation about the French laïcité in the world. I will be quite brief on the first, but you know that now, in the world today, this matter of freedom of religion or belief, the protection of religious minorities, is quite an important matter with a lot of debates in the United Nations, the Council of Human Rights, and other fora. And as French government, we try to have an active role in this. And a very important step for us was that in June of the past year, the EU, the European Union, adopted main lines about the freedom of religion and belief. It means that now, for the first time, I have to say, the Europeans, the 28th member of the EU, we have a common policy for defending the freedom of religion and beliefs in the world. And the second issue about that was the discussion and the dialogue with the organization of the Islamic Conference or Islamic Cooperation, because during some years you remember that the organization wanted to create new rules in the international law against the defamation of religion, telling that all the religions have to be respected, and that there are some offenses very serious against them, and that it was necessary inside the international law to have new regulation against that, including for the international peace. And we say at this time that we disagree with this approach, telling that for us it was necessary to preserve the persons more than the religions themselves, and that creating new regulation about the respect of religions against blasphemy and so could be a very serious danger against the freedom of expression and speech. It was quite clear for us that if in the international rule you introduce some very precise regulation against the defamation of religions, the freedom of expression will be reduced. So it would have been a risk. So we propose with the United States and the EU to the Organization of the Islamic Cooperation to say, look, it's better not to create the new rules because it will be a problem, but to apply the existing international law about the protection of the persons. You know that in the international law, but for example in the internal law too in France, if it's aggression, an act against somebody for religious motives, it's punished by the law. If you have anti-Muslim acts, anti-Jews act, anti-Christians act, and so on, you have the justice has to apply the law, and it's quite severely punished. So we have to apply that first, and not creating the new rules. The last stage, yes, I have only 5 minutes. The last thing is about the laicity. We have, I think it's necessary for us, because at each country we have, our system is quite original. The French system of separation, with our own history, we have to try to explain abroad our system and to demonstrate the fact that it's not a system of hostility against the religion, it's not a system of indifference, but it's a system creating a kind of relationship of dialogue which is quite unique or peculiar. And at the same time, there were two types of criticism in the world against the French system. One telling that, one coming more from the United States or the Anglo-Saxon world about the sectarian movements. Because in France, we have a legislation not against exactly the sectarian movements, but against the sectarian drifts. There are some type of behaviors or attitudes being excesses committed by persons or groups which are punished by the law. The abuse against the persons, and so that you have in some kind of groups. And these are sectarian drifts punished by law, being inside of religious organization or other groups, you know. And, but we defend that. We have this system with Belgium. We are two countries in the world to have this, and telling we don't try to attack religious organization or belief groups and so, but some type very precise of very negative attitudes being created by some person in this framework. And the second point, and I know that Mr. Yuji will speak about that too, is about the fact that France is accused sometimes in the Muslim world to be anti-Muslim by the legislation of 2004 and 2010. 2004, it was a law prohibiting the religious signs in the state school. And the law of 2010, it was about prohibiting the dissimulation of the face in the public space. It means prohibiting the complete burqa veil in the streets and so on. I want only to say three things, but very briefly, Mr. Moderator. First, that France being a country of religious freedom, and the Muslims in France, they have the complete freedom of religion and worship. And there were many progresses done during the 20 past years for the number of mosques, of imams, and the organization of the Muslim faith in the country, being, as I said, second religion of the country. And second, I think that the two laws were justified by very different reasons. The first law about the state school was about the reasons of laicity, telling that the state school, it's part of the state sphere, which is in France historically the sphere of neutrality. And it was the fact was that it was extending the neutrality of the teachers and agents to the pupils, being a special sphere of neutrality there, which is not the case, of course, yes, for what we call the espace public, but it means in fact the common spaces are the streets and so, and the law against the burqa was in fact a law more justified by public orders and the reasons of securities and values, but more for reasons of security. So I think it was two different cases, but it's not all a picture. My conclusion would be to say that I really think that our system of laicity is good, in fact, for the practice of religions and Islam in France, preserving what is the liberty and the autonomy of the religion themselves. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much, Monsieur Bertrand. You are completely right when you pointed out that in 2004 and 2010, on the French government policy to ban headscarf wearing, and in 2010 on burqa, make a very hot issue in Indonesia, and there was some reaction from the Indonesian Muslims. So I think you have so many questions for Monsieur Bertrand, but please hold on your question until we listen to our second speaker, Professor Azumar Azra. He is going to deliver on Indonesian Islam, democracy, and Sharia.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very good morning, Excellency Ambassador of France to Indonesia, honorable guests, colleagues and students, speakers. I am very grateful to the Ambassador of France that have organized the visit of our honorable guests, our honorable speakers to this conference. Also, of course, my colleague, Professor Bahtiar Effendi, the Dean of Faculty of Social and Political Sciences of the UIN Jakarta. I have my complete paper with you, I think, entitled Indonesian State, Democracy and Sharia. Of course, I'm not going to read this full-blown paper. I'm going to highlight only some very important issues. The first one, all we know that Indonesia now is the largest Muslim country, or if you will, you can call it the country with the largest Muslim population, with some 88.7% out of 240 million people is Muslim. And at the same time, Indonesia is also a democracy, the third largest democracy after India, USA, and of course the third Indonesia. Indonesia is the place where Islam is compatible with democracy. There is no problem between democracy and Islam. The situation is different from other Muslim countries, let's say in the Arab world, where you have Arab Spring since early 2011, I think. January 2011 began in Tunisia, and then Egypt, Yemen, Bahrain, and bloody revolution, bloody civil war in Syria up until now. Why Indonesian Muslim can accept democracy? I think this is related mostly to what I call as the distinction of Indonesian Islam, where Islam is embedded with local culture. So there are some distinctions, several distinctions of Indonesian Muslims, Indonesian Islam vis-a-vis Middle Eastern Islam or Southeast Asian Islam or South Asian Islam in Bangladesh, Pakistan, and India, of course, and Afghanistan. I will return, or you can read my paper on distinction of Indonesian Islam. Second, it is important also to know that despite the fact that almost 90% of Indonesia's total population is Muslim, neither is Indonesia an Islamic state, nor is Islam the official religion of the state. We don't have official religion. We don't have state religion, nor is Indonesia based on religion, particularly Islam. Probably some people would expect that Indonesia should be based on Islam because of the absolute majority of the population is Muslim. But Indonesia is based on Pancasila, 5 pillars. Pancasila, 5 pillars. Pancasila is basically the confessional ideology, the confessional state basis of the state. The confessional means that it's not based on particular confession, particular religion. So Pancasila is not based either on particular religion. Pancasila is basically neutral vis-a-vis religion. Even though, of course, Muslims have their own perspective on how to understand, how to translate Pancasila. So that's why Indonesia has been called by some foreign observers or some Indonesians a secular state, simply because Indonesia is not theocracy. Indonesia is not based on particular religion. So that's why Indonesia is called by them as a secular state. But of course, Indonesians in general do not accept that their country is a secular state. For them, the term secularisms are anathema, having pejorative meanings for most Indonesian Muslims. Because in their perception, secular state and secularism have a lot to do with the experience of Turkey during Kemal Atatürk. And then of course, the Turkish experience with secularism is haunting Indonesia. They are very afraid of the Turkish experience because since the time of Mustafa Kemal or Atatürk, in fact, even though Turkey is a secular state, but Turkish secularism is hostile to religion. Hostile to religion, in this case is Islam. Because in Turkey you cannot, for instance, during Mustafa Kemal Atatürk times, up until recent time, you are not allowed, for instance, to wear Islamic clothing. Or you cannot use the religious title like Haji or Effendi. Effendi is religious title in Turkey. Or Hoja or something like that. Yeah. But Indonesia, of course, Indonesian men are very happy to put H before his name, meaning Haji. Yeah? Because if you have title Haji in Indonesia, your hands will be kissed by. So, but not in Turkey. Only recent time, Turkey I think has made some subtle changes. Now even the wife of Prime Minister, the wife of President wear hijab or jilbab in Indonesia. But still in public institution, women are not allowed to wear hijab. So Indonesia is based on Pancasila, but I would argue that Pancasila is a religiously friendly basis of the state. Religiously friendly basis of the state. Why Pancasila is friendly to religion? Because the very first pillar of Pancasila is belief in one supreme God. Ketuhanan yang Maha Esa, belief in one supreme God. That's the very first pillar of Pancasila. So that's why Indonesia actually has put religion in a very lofty place, in a high place, respected place. And of course, if we talk about Ketuhanan yang Maha Esa, belief in one supreme God, Muslim believe the concept of belief in one supreme God should be translated into belief in Tauhid. Belief in Tauhid meaning, that's why Islam has a very strict understanding, strict sense of monotheism called Tauhid. So belief in one supreme God by Indonesian Muslim thinkers and ulama translated as belief in Tauhid. So that's why bulk majority of Indonesian Muslim do not have any problem with Pancasila, except Pancasila. No problem with Pancasila. So I think this is, I think the fact that Indonesia is based on Pancasila is another distinction of Indonesian Islam. If you compare it again with Middle Eastern countries, and then most of Middle Eastern countries have basically unfriendly, religiously unfriendly basis of the state or ideology, if you will. Let's take the example of Ba'athism in Syria and also in Iraq. Ba'athism